Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This is actually take two. We tried to chat earlier about Eze or Nunes because it's been a crazy week of football. But Amos's mic was being mental, though it's not actually Amos's mic. I think it's my computer for whatever reason. So we're going to test it right now. You guys in the chat need to let us know if he sounds like a Dalek or if he sounds like Amos. Unless Amos actually sounds like a Dalek and then we're screwed anyway. Go on, mate.
That's the problem, isn't it? Do I actually sound like a Dalek Cybermen hybrid? It was quite a strange one. Hopefully it's fixed.
It works, apparently.
Sure.
Everyone's saying it works. There we go. Guess
that's
what?
a
Guess
relief.
what? I just turned it on and off again. It's mad how many live problems are solved by just turning it on and off again. It's sort of like the equivalent of like just going on holiday, isn't it? You know, like turning on and off again. Like essentially, sometimes you just need to just go to bed, and the computer needed to go to bed, and there we go. Anyway, as we were saying at the start of the previous attempt at this video, it's been a crazy week in the world of Manchester City Football Club. It really has. Honestly, it's been mad. I've realised I've not actually tweeted out because I forgot to do it. Let me just do the social post. If everyone could do me a massive favour and go and tweet this, it'd be hugely useful. Because we've come too far. We've come too far down this road to not do it anyway.
I know. We've put so much into it. We've got to make sure.
We've only got like 4 minutes left.
You've got to enjoy it.
As we were saying anyway, I was the same before and at the start of the last video. It's been a crazy week. It really has. Like, there's been so much going on. Of course, we had so many players linked to Manchester City Football Club. Of course, Paqueta went mental. Well, his family went mental. Something went mental. It didn't go. It didn't work. That turned off. And then it looked like Olmo was linked for a little bit. He said not now anyway. And then Eze was sort of linked, and then of course now it looks like Matheus Nunes as well, and of course there's a Bernardo Silva contract going on. There's so much, but Pep's injured himself. It's just been a mad week in the world of football. I'm so tired that last night I actually asked my missus, "Do we need to put the bins out?" It's a Friday. Do we do that? I don't know. I genuinely thought it was Thursday evening. That's where we're at.
One of them weeks.
How are you?
One of them weeks.
How are you? You good?
Yeah, I'm good. It has been a crazy week, obviously at the start of it, as we were saying on part one, which didn't go out, but it felt at the start, after the Newcastle game, basically, as we woke up on Sunday, okay, we've got through that challenge. This is where our season kind of starts to kick off now in terms of the last couple of weeks of the transfer window. And it's been one of them weeks. Jeremy Doku, signed, sealed, delivered. Near enough signed, sealed, delivered. He's going to be coming in, nicely done. And then obviously a midfielder of two midfielders. We'll get chatting about that, I'm guessing, but it's been crazy. The next 2 weeks, I can imagine being quite wild.
Like uncharacteristically crazy is what I would say. There's usually a little bit more control in this. And of course, I was chatting to Ace the other day from 9320, and he said it does feel a bit sloppy, and I do actually agree. And I think most City fans now, even the happy clappers, we'd probably all admit it hasn't really been optimal for this Manchester City transfer window. We've been some fault of our own, some just bad luck, and some just life. It's been a bit crazy, I think there was an element of something's happened that we didn't expect to happen. Obviously the Saudi market inflating things, taking Riyad Mahrez. We never expected that in a million years, I don't think. But still, our reaction has been pretty slow. And of course, it looked like we'd actually got a man. Paqueta, that by all accounts now, that deal was done. It's going to be around £80 million, and then it's. It's a crazy time, like who would have known that was coming out of nowhere? That was
typical City, isn't it? Just for a different club. Even transfers, it gets us.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Is like there's not much you can say about that. But now, of course, there's two very contrasting names. Now, this broke yesterday about Eberechi Eze. I actually genuinely heard a little bit about this myself, but I didn't really put it online because I don't do the in the know stuff. And then, of course, it's broke now via Jack Gorn today, and in the past hour or two, I've not actually read the tweet myself, but I know Mr. Bombazzo himself, David Ornstein. Let me read the tweet. Let me find the tweet. He said, City are exploring a deal to sign Matheus Nunes from Wolves. 24-year-old high among small pool of options. City considered to bolster midfield. Wolves unlikely to welcome interest so late, but would bring funds to strengthen in multiple areas. That's usually, that last line there is usually indicative of, someone's, oh no, don't take him, but give us loads of money. It's interesting. Where's your head at? With how the last 24 hours, how the last week's gone in terms of like this transfer, this saga going on, what's going on?
Yeah, pretty scrambled, as you can imagine, but we'll try and cut through it. Matheus Nunes is a really interesting player. I think people will remember from the 2021-22 campaign, Pep Guardiola calling him one of the best players in the world right now. And it sounded at the time, and it very well have been. It sounded that it was, typical Pep saying his Pep stuff, getting into the opposition heads, and how he says Bournemouth are the best team in the world before beating them 6-0 or something like that. But this is a player who has been monitored for City for quite a while. He's somebody who fits the traditional mould as what we would expect for a Guardiola midfielder. He's someone who I believe City were looking at whilst he was still at Sporting, going back a couple of years. While on the other hand, you've got Eze, who is quite the maverick in terms of his playing style. He's an absolute gem. He lights up the stadiums, the pitches whenever he gets the ball. He's someone who dribbles fantastically. Probably not in the same mold of a De Bruyne, but in terms of making stuff happen, he's that sort of player. So it is two completely contrasting options, maybe indicative of where we are in the market and the timing of the market and the date of the market. I think it's 9 days are remaining, but stuff to get excited about at least.
Why do you think it is that they're so different in profile? Because, I mean, even Paqueta to Eze to Nunes to Bellingham to Declan Rice, all the names we've been linked to, they're all very different players. Every single one of them has got different strengths and weaknesses. But these two in particular seem, the relatively different ends of the scale. What do you think the idea behind that is? Is there an idea? Is it a case of anyone will do in midfield? Is it a case of people will be moving around if that happens? Is it a numbers thing? What do you think's going on?
I think it goes back to what you were saying at the start, to be honest, in the sense that this window has felt very un-City-like, and there hasn't really been a rhyme or reason. Obviously, recruitment-wise, that there is a rhyme and reason that these players aren't just being plucked out of thin air. But I think it's possibly a case of the market slimming. The options aren't plentiful.
Yeah.
I think City would have loved to look at someone like Florian Wirtz this summer, especially given the De Bruyne injury. That's unlikely to happen. He wants to stay at Bayer Leverkusen for a home Euros next summer. So that's going to be that one, unless you're going off 150 million, which is something City notoriously don't do. Declan Rice, that always felt like a weird transfer saga. Jude Bellingham, did City ever have a real chance? Was his heart set on Real Madrid? I suppose the comments suggest, yeah. So, you're working your way down a list of very good, but not that many options at the same time. And I think you have to then, at that case, be flexible with your recruitment. And that's why we're seeing somebody in Nunes who could play alongside a holding midfielder like Rodri, and then Eze, who is like a pretty traditional attacking midfield number 10 option as well.
Yeah, and they are such different players that it does... I can't see any scenario where City just play differently depending on who they sign, which sounds wild. But Nunes cannot do what Eze can do, and Eze can't probably do what Nunes can do. I mean, Nunes to me is... I remember watching him quite intently when City were linked last year, and I did a little mini thread myself on Twitter and so on, and I remember thinking at the time, look, you can see why City are linked to this guy immediately. The way he strides, through the pitch reminded me a little bit of Cancelo when he's upright and he's running and gliding past people. There's a physicality to him that reminds me a little bit of an early Fernandinho as well. He's just a very technical player, but there's a little bit of a kind of agriculturalness to him as well, which would suit this modern Man City where there's a bit of physicality. So I'm thinking, well, this guy, and we've seen him in the Premier League have some great games, most notably recently against United as well. He's obviously technically good enough. He's obviously got the pedigree, but he's more of I would say he's more of a classic 8. I wouldn't say he's the most creatively brilliant player. He's more. Well, I guess he's more like Kovacic that way in terms of not quite as silky smooth as Kovacic, but more of a box to box than a classic number 10. Whereas Eze's pure flamboyance and skill and energy, and all I can think is what do we need more? What do we need more, in your humble opinion? Because I have my opinion, but I want to know what does this Manchester City side need? And obviously both would be good, but which one do we need more?
I'll caveat by saying I would love to see Eze under Pep Guardiola, but I feel as if looking at the squad as it is at the moment, I'm kind of leaning towards Nunes.
Okay.
Obviously, a lot of the chatter is about City lacking creativity, but go back 4 days to the Newcastle game. I think it's maybe tore apart isn't the right word, but Foden and Alvarez tormented one of the best defences in the Premier League, or at least they were last season. And we know how good Newcastle and how resilient they are. had Haaland, this sounds crazy to say it, had Haaland been able to finish his chances, City would have probably won 3 or 4-0.
Yeah.
And then we're sat here going, fluid Manchester City are back, defensively solid, creative output in abundance. It was only because Haaland fluffed his chances that City didn't get 3 or 4 goals. So I'm not, with Foden and Alvarez in those positions, granted they can't play both of them all the time, I'm not craving for creativity. It'd be great to have someone like Eze, but you have to take account for the price tag as well. It's going to be a lot of money. Granted, the market's skewed, etc., etc. But I feel with Matheus Nunes, and it leads on. You can see we're doing a lot of like jigsaw piece puzzling together here. It is one of those. You've got to think about the players who will be here, who won't. But if reports that Calvin Phillips is going to be loaned out are true, this makes sense because it allows Kovacic to play alongside Rodri. It allows Kovacic to play instead of Rodri as well. So I just feel like it gives City a lot more options, a lot more balance, as opposed to a maverick attacking midfielder like Eze would be.
Okay. I guess I can see arguments for either, really, if I'm being honest. Like, for me, I think I just wonder if we have what Nunes brings already potentially in Kovacic, in terms of the trait set. And I guess I'm just naturally drawn to Eze because he just seems so different to what we have to an extent. And like, there's an element of that where I think you're probably actually right for what it's worth in terms of we may require that more. But I'm thinking if we're going to play this double pivot thing, I guess actually that's fair. If we're going to play this double pivot with 3 and number 10. Do we need another number 10 or do we need another entry in that double pivot? And it probably actually is the latter. I mean, I'll be honest there. It probably actually is someone like Nunes who could potentially take over from Rodri or Kovacic. Whereas, even though I want Eze, well, KDB will come back eventually. Then is he going to be relegated to third choice behind Foden? Or then could he play out wide, though? Like, do we get another winger option and Bernardo comes more central? And then Bernardo comes in double pivot alongside Rodri, where he's done it a brilliant times before. So it's really weird because you can spin this in many ways with either player because either player frees up so much different potential, in the squad. And it's Thomas just said both 130 million. Who says no? I think Wolves and Palace probably do for what it's worth, mate.
Probably, probably. But, Steve Parish.
Yeah, it's not that. Maybe 140 would get him. 70 million each potentially. I don't know. The thing is, Eze can be as a winger. He can be as number 10. But then Nunes can be as a 6, as an 8, and Nunes more versatile potentially. Yeah, it's very difficult. I've got a general view, Amos, where as long as the players of a certain level of quality, I don't overly mind who comes in. I know that's quite a simple view, but would you be sort of fine with if either of these come in? Like, do you think that we would then have the options to do what we need if either of these players came in, or would there still be trouble?
Yeah, do you know what's weird? I think if you take it in isolation and you look at City's recruitment this summer, Kovacic, fantastic. We know what you can do. Premier League proven midfielder, 29 years old, multiple Champions League trophies, put him to one side. But I think if you look at the other signings, take Guardiola as the manager away, you're looking at it and it's a little bit scattergun. It doesn't make sense on paper, but we know because Guardiola and his brilliance, we know it does make sense, and we can see when the players start getting the minutes, how it's going to look, how people can be rotated in positions, etc. But say this was a different manager, you would be looking at it going, okay, what sort of philosophy, what sort of style is City going after here? And that's exactly the same with Eze and with Nunes because they are so contrasting. And it's weird to see a world where City chase the two of them because usually, you have your top target, say it's a striker, you have your Erling Haaland, you might have a 2 or 3 underneath that. I know they said Darwin Núñez, and that would have been really funny to see him under Pep Guardiola, wouldn't it? But, yeah, as a right back. But I think it's because we have Guardiola, we're so calm, we're so composed, and we know City don't make transfers on the whim, or at least they haven't yet. Maybe this summer is different, only time will tell. But you'd be surprised, wouldn't you, if come 12 months' time, Jeremy Doku hasn't had a decent first season, Matheus Nunes or Eze, whoever it may be, comes in and makes an impact. Gvardiol's being talked about as one of the best defenders in the league. That's just the impact of Guardiola, and I guess we're blessed because of it.
Yeah, and Kovacic, of course, I mean, when you start to actually lay it out, it could be one of those things where we've reached the conclusion chaotically, but in the end, we might be looking, that was a really good summer, we might end up being a very good summer. But I guess it depends. There's a lot of questions there, and it's weird because it feels like to me, even with Nunes in this as well, but particularly Eze and Doku, like we've always had a trend of sort of like signing players just below the world class level. You know, like very good players, then taking them to that next step. It just seems like Diaz, for example, Rodri, they're prime examples there. Players who were considered very good, but they weren't considered best in class. You know, and now they are, but in their positions. And you know, I think we even saw a bit of a finish score for De Bruyne and David Silva, if we're being totally honest, and Fernandinho. They improved massively under Guardiola as well, even though they were already top class players. And I would wonder though, all these players in particular, these two, are they quite at the level that we're used to signing? And I would argue for the value that we're going at, they're maybe not quite there. You know, like, and I mean this. I'm not saying they could be, and I'm still relaxed about it because I think they have the inherent talent. But Nunes is not the level that Rodri was when we signed him. You know, and I think Eze is not the level that Kevin De Bruyne was when we signed him, so to speak. Is this a sort of change of strategy? Is it necessary? Is it because it feels to me like these Doku and one of these two would be more of a risk than City usually take. Am I onto something there, or is that unfair?
No, I think you are onto something. It is definitely a shift, especially considering City. There'll probably be ample examples, but they rarely buy from inside the Premier League. You know, you look back to it, Rodri was Atletico Madrid, Edison, Benfica, Bernardo Silva, Monaco. Those teams, like you say, who were probably just below the world-class level. I wonder, actually, I've just had this thought. I wonder if we're starting to see the pattern shift on the continent and in England, in the sense that the Premier League quality at those lower level clubs like Wolves, like Crystal Palace, is actually much better than we really give it credit for. Yeah, and the fact that, you know, you do have someone like Matheus Nunes, who came in from Sporting last year, just festering in what we perceive, just in that really sort of like really weird Wolves squad that were brilliant against United and then just hopeless against Brighton. But, you know, they do have some gems in there, and I wonder if that's what they're looking to do.
There's so many. I look around so many teams now in the Premier League, and there are so many teams that have a player that could play Champions League football. I'm not saying it for Man City, but for a Sporting, you know, like Eze would obviously start for Sporting, or he'd start for Benfica. He probably would, and then we'd be looking at him and going, "Oh wow, who's this silky midfielder?" You know, as I said on Twitter, joking earlier, Ezebinho or whatever. You know, like you'd be like, "Oh, he sounds fun." But the point is, I guess we could look at Palace would be probably challenging near the top of the Portuguese league, and that's not to be disrespectful. They just probably would, you know, because they've got a lot of quality Premier League players, and maybe we do underestimate the level of the Premier League a bit, where potentially these players are actually that level. They're just not at the level of the size of club, but the level of the league is equivalent. Yeah. So it's a good way of looking at it potentially. And I guess you could turn around and argue that, you know, the Premier League is actually, there's no better finishing school than the Premier League, or better proof, because if they can do it in the Premier League and they can have great performances, like Eze was good against Arsenal the other day, for example. Nunes, we know we can do it. Obviously not consistently to the level of Manchester City player yet, but then they would look at someone like Nathan Ake and go, well, you know, we know he's got the ability and the right talent and the right attitude, so to speak. Well, what's to say Nunes or Eze couldn't step up in the same level? It's very difficult, isn't it, to decide? But
yeah,
what about the fees then? Because where do you stand on this? Because these are going to be at minimum 70 million. Either of these will be £70 million, if not more potentially. Is it stupid? Do you care? Is it not your money? Should we be better at this? Does it go against what we usually do? There's loads of ways to look at this, and I don't think there's a right way to look at it either. I think there's many fair ways, but what do you reckon?
Yeah. I was going to say I'm probably a mixture of all sort of all factors in it, which isn't a great answer. But I think, I think it has to be said. Obviously, going back to the Premier League point, you're going to pay premiums. Matheus Nunes, what was it, £35-ish million from Sporting to Wolves last year? I think Liverpool had an agreement, or at least it was reported, that they could snatch him for 50 million this year. I'm not sure if that's still active and whether or not that plays into the evaluation. But obviously, you were paying premiums because players are quite happy to play in the Premier League. I think it's, you know, we know it's the best league in the world. We know the lifestyle's good. We know the wages are great. So that you have to maybe like a £20 million levy on top of it. So you do that and you say, is Matheus Nunes worth, let's say, 50, 60 million? Yeah, of course they are. And I guess City have made so much money this summer. We're just seeing Laporte go off. He's got 2 years left on his contract, 30 million quid straight in the bank. He's not going to a rival, or at least not yet. Al Nassr, maybe they get a Champions League spot in a couple of years' time and we'll see him again. But he's not like City have sold to Arsenal or Chelsea or anything like that. So they can wipe their hands with that one. And that's another 30 million quid in the bank. The academy sales, we know so much about it. It's banged on quite a lot, but it does generate a lot of money. So City do have this money they can spend. It isn't as if we are doing a Chelsea and we're spending £500 million per summer whilst making next to nothing on the way back. So we're not funding it. We're not having to crowdfund. That's great, but you do question the fees. 80 million quid for someone like Matheus Nunes is a lot, but I guess it's the way of the world.
Yeah, I mean, there's the tendency to sit there and, I saw someone on Inter earlier saying, like, oh, we can't clutch our pearls with this and scream, it's crazy in the market because we're sort of, complicit as well, let's be honest. Jack Grealish for £100 million a couple of years back now as well, for what it's worth. It wasn't even, like, recent. That was in football terms, 2 years is a long time. That was even before the market got insane, like, this year. And look, we've once you show the precedent, even Guardiola, 77 million quid. It's a lot of money, and like we're aware of the English tax and we're aware of what we were willing to spend on Declan Rice at one point and Bellingham and so on. So this is it's weird because I understand if they asked for 100 million, you'd be like, come on. But it does feel alright. I think that Joe Butterfield said on Twitter the other day, it feels like 70 to 80 million is the new 50 to 60, and it does feel that way. It does. It's one of those things where it's like there is. We also probably have to sort of accept that if we're going to go around talking about how much money we're making from these academy players, and that's the other side to it, by the way. We're getting academy players going for £20 million if you've only played in League One.
Yeah.
James Shafford going for 19 million quid. So like we can't go, oh, that's great. Oh, but you want loads of money too for your player. Like it doesn't work that way, does it? If we're going to get 20 million for a guy who would have got 2 million for 5 years ago, I'm not exaggerating. It would have been. Remember we saw Tosin Adarabioyo for 1.5 million.
Crazy.
And now we're getting 20 million pounds for for kids like that. Then this is the flip side of it. So for what it's worth, I think City are aware of that. I don't think they're stupid. I think they know that they're gonna have to play a little bit. But I think maybe as a fan base as well, we have to sort of accept that like the market isn't what it was, and we have to accept that. Maybe also accept that they're on City's list. They're on City's list for a reason because they think they can do the job. It's a super chat here from Cool Guy 80, which is a great name. I rank you Cool Guy 80. Said I feel City should go in for Kudus, a quality player who I feel is better than Nunes or Eze, not Premier League proven and may not be a direct replacement for KDB. What do you feel about him, the Ajax lad? Are you a fan?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. He sort of burst on the scene about 12 months ago. He had a wonderful goal at Anfield against Liverpool in the Champions League. And it's funny, Everton were looking at him. In fact, Everton came really close to signing him this time last year. But obviously, he had a great season with Ajax, and then he went to the World Cup and shone for Ghana. Yeah. And he went from being an Everton target to an Arsenal. It seems crazy saying this, but a Brighton target. Even West Ham, obviously, Conference League winners. He's a really good player. I'm surprised that he haven't. And I guess it goes back to what we were saying before in the sense that the Premier League is now a stepping stone to those elite clubs, because I think this is the sort of player 2-3 years ago City would have been all over. A Bernardo Silva style move, if that makes sense. Go after the next unhidden gem from one of the clubs in that middle bracket in Europe. But nowadays, the quality is so high and the standards at City are so high, they have to sort of make sure those players who are coming in have that Premier League experience, because you can get sort of caught up by it as a player in the Premier League. It's a completely different, when you're playing against Chelsea, you're playing against Brighton, you're playing against West Ham every week. It's much different to playing against Feyenoord, PSV, Herenveen, fantastic clubs.
It's another level.
I know it really is another level. So Mohamed Kudus is a fantastic player. I wouldn't mind seeing him have another year at Ajax, and then when he's a year older, maybe next season when we start to maybe look at De Bruyne replacements. I didn't say it, but potentially this time next year we might have to. I know.
Mute button on. Like the thing is, like the way I feel about Kudus is what I can. I feel like he is still a little bit raw for me, like a little bit raw, like a very talented footballer, but very much just burst onto the scene. And I'm wary of attacking midfielders bursting onto the team from the Netherlands in general because it's just so open and so loose. And I'm also just wary of international football because I think international football is just naff. I really don't.
Yeah.
This is one of my hot takes, is that I feel like international football is just a low level. Like, it's just the
Totally
Premier League
agree.
is
Totally
miles
agree.
better than international football because they're just international. The reason Paul Pogba looks great for France, because he gets a billion Xhaka for Switzerland. They get so much time on the ball. They're so open because international football is tactically just naive because they haven't got a chance to, do much. So Kudus is a good player, but I feel like he does need that next step first. I understand why City don't go in for him immediately, and I think I had a bit of a realization recently when people were debating like, why are we not going for this guy and this guy and this guy? And it's always cheaper players. And the thing is, the way that City tend to look at these signings, I know, is that they sort of look at levels of risk. And like when we talk about people like Rodri and Diaz and whatever who play Champions League football and they played it. Especially Rodri, for example, Atletico Madrid and Laporte was at Bilbao. They're playing at high leagues, and Paquetá would have fell into that example as well, where he's played in Brazil, he's played in AC Milan, Lyon, West Ham, and been good everywhere. Like eventually, the more clubs you see him at, the more levels they play at, and they're still good at those levels. It just shows you a full picture of who they are, and the risk factor goes down. So I understand why City sometimes don't always go for 14, 20 million pound players, because you just never know if they actually can do it. And they'd rather just sign someone for 50 million instead, because weirdly, that's less likely to waste 30 million pounds with the difference of 50. I know it sounds crazy, but it's just...
it makes sense.
And they do that. They look for people who are closer to proven and spend the money because they're Man City and they don't need to spend 20 million. Because you might have to find... Look at their last few cheap signings. Sergio Gomez, Akanji. Who are these? Sergio Gomez. It's Akanji. It's Alvarez. But then then it was like Bravo. He's not right. Not the right example. There's someone else. Who's the other one I'm thinking of? Even like Peroni for 8-9 million. They've obviously decided that he's not quite ready yet because he's obviously young. Gomez hasn't quite happened. He was a bit of a gamble. Akanji definitely worked, and Alvarez did. But the ones that have worked, unsurprisingly, the ones who played at a higher level, like Alvarez, a World Cup proven winner, like literally. And I know I talked about international football, but he played alongside Messi and won a World Cup, and he played for the most intense team in Argentinian football.
River Plate, yeah. And it's interesting, just quickly on Alvarez, he stuck about in South America for longer than most people do. He was still there in his 20s, and he had that experience. Some
players are just pretty winners. And then Akanji played Champions League football, and then guess the one that came from Anderlecht has probably struggled because maybe he did need that next step. And City, like, there you look about the ones who haven't quite worked. You can end up getting like 30-40 million pounds, and none of them make it world class. Where they could just go sign that one there. He's really obviously got the quality to fight at a high level, and it's more of a guarantee. So it's difficult to sit and watch young players disappear. But this is why I guess going full circle, Eze and Nunes. Are these just, are these actually not as risky as we think they are? Do you think they have, does Eze, for example, does he have the quality to step up for Manchester City?
Do you know what? I think most players in the Premier League have the quality. It's whether or not they have the application, the mentality, the fitness, etc. I think that's probably what clubs look at more. Obviously, you can look at a certain player and say they're not good enough. That most eye tests can do that. But in terms of Eze and Nunes, I'd have full confidence if they were signed. I wouldn't be sat there going, oh, you know what, I'm not sure on this deal. I think they'd be fantastic additions. It's at this point, at this time of the window, given the state of the squad, I think that the debate they'll be having behind closed doors in the recruitment staff and the meeting rooms will be which one fits us best. I think it'd be fantastic in a world if we could go out and get both of them. It probably blow the squad up a little bit, but we are playing more football. Players are getting injured. But is that going to happen? I mean, it might do. I genuinely don't know. But I think it's probably going to be one or the other. And for me, I think at this moment in time, it's Nunes makes more sense. Although I would absolutely love Eze under Pep. I think it'd be fantastic to watch. Yeah, definitely.
Who do you think it's easier to do out of the two of them in terms of transfers?
I do have a strong opinion on this. I think it'd be Nunes.
Yeah, same.
Obviously, Wolves are 2 from 2 defeated. They are having honking FFP issues. They had to send Neves to Saudi Arabia for 47 million. I think he could probably dangle a 60 million pound carrot in
Yeah.
front of their eyes, and they'd probably snatch it off, I reckon.
And given the fact that as well, there is the Pep Man City test. He's played, Pep loves him. He's played against him
Mm,
before, and Champions League proven to an extent. I think Nunes. I do think Nunes is very, very attainable. I think they would take the money in a heartbeat. I
yeah.
think there's an acceptance as well from Wolves that they do lose a few key players. They've lost them before. Obviously, Jota
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
Liverpool, of course, as well. And I think they'd accept it, around 60 odd million quid, and I think they'd be like, "Look, we might go down here. We've got, as you said, honking issues and FFP. Great, we're used to honking." And I think they would. I think they would accept it too, and I think it's less
Yeah.
complicated. The other thing with Eze is that I know that Eze wants it, and I know he's got 2 years left on his contract. They kept Olise, so they might look at it as like, well, we get one of them.
Yeah.
Like 70,
Yeah.
they might be tempted by 70 million for a guy who clearly isn't going to extend his contract. They were burned by Zaha as well. Obviously leaving on a free, their superstar, and it can happen once, but twice is tough to take, especially when they know that his
Mm.
value will drop. It'll make it very, if he's not
Yeah.
signed a contract by January, he's definitely going to leave. In a year and a half on a free. So they'll be thinking,
Mm.
should we take 70 million now? And the City would pay that. I think it's what it's worth, and it's hard. It's hard. What do you think's going to happen to Calvin Phillips, by the way? Do you think he'll go, or do you think he's going to stay?
It's looking ominous, isn't it? Obviously, it was one of those news stories packed into a busy week that he's potentially going to be loaned out. I don't know what sense that makes for both player for club. For what it's worth, I'd quite like him to be given an opportunity so we can make our judgment based on actual meaningful minutes. Like, it
Yeah,
feels like we've not seen him play more than a 20-minute cameo, bar the odd start against Southampton, and everyone was bad against Southampton. So I'd be sad to see him go after a year. But if he is going to be loaned out at what 28 years old, I don't know what benefit that has to him, and I don't know what benefit that has to City because they're just leaving a gap in the squad. So the signs are looking ominous. I think if we're being honest, Guardiola would quite like to sort of wash his hands and get
yeah,
rid. I think he's not playing even the odd 5 minute substitute appearance. So I think that tells us everything we need to know. It's whether or not Phillips says yes to a move, and I feel like that's probably where we're at this moment in time. Him agreeing on something that isn't going to damage his ego too substantially, and I think that's fair enough. He's waited his whole life for a
yeah.
big money move. It'd be sad for him if it ended after a year, but I suppose City have to think with their best foot forward.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And the thing is, I think at the same point, what any of us feel about Calvin Phillips is sort of irrelevant to the extent. Whereas it's really obvious. People have started to try to people jumped on me for saying it's really obvious Pep's made his mind up, but come on, there is
Mm,
it's staring us all in
yeah,
the face at this point, and this lone news story has not come from nowhere. That's definitely been leaked, and to sort of
yeah,
set a narrative and so on. And it's something to consider. I think, I don't know, if he does go on loan, I think he'll have to be a club where his pride doesn't take too much of a hit, like a Liverpool, for example.
yeah.
That'd be wild, that for what it's worth. Cool Guy 80, if I want to go another super chat, has sort of challenged my point, which is a very fair point with another super chat. Thank you, Cool Guy, by the way. I love great name. I love the sport. It's really appreciated, man. He said that what you said is taken into consideration for Kudus, and why have City signed Doku, who I feel is more raw than Kudus and is coming from League One. It's a good point. My instinct reaction would be, is they are more likely to take a raw winger than they are raw midfielder, and I think because I think that they're relatively comfortable with Grealish, Foden, Bernardo playing out wide potentially, and Doku with versatility playing left and right. I agree. Actually, it is a risk, but I would think that his explosive attributes are so drastically different to what we've got that they think, well, he is a bit of a risk, and Pep could always just revert to playing midfielders out wide if needs be. That would be my answer. What would you say, Amos?
Do you know what? I'm exactly the same. I felt when the news broke that it was a bit of a weird
Yeah,
one. It's one of the stranger signings we've had under Guardiola because if not in the sense that his profile doesn't fit what we've had previously with the likes of Sterling, Sane, etc. Just given the state of the squad at the moment and the entire summer we were told we're looking at wingers who are ball dominant, who can recycle possession, Grealish, a Bernardo sort of style, which Kudus, funnily enough, would probably fit if he played out wide. But I think you're right in the sense that he's probably not going to start a lot of games this season. Sorry, that forwards never do in their first season for Guardiola. But he's so drastically different to what is there. It's a point of difference almost in the sense that the profile is the complete antithesis of Grealish, for example. Two ends of the spectrum, Grealish one, Doku here. So if City is struggling, if City feel like they need somebody like that to come into a game and change it, then it's an option. Again, the fee expensive, but who isn't? He's clearly a player with plenty of talent, and probably people will start to see this when he plays for City. But he's more technical than he's getting credit for at the moment. It isn't just pure pace down the byline, cross a ball in. He is a really canny operator. So that's another one exciting to see. I think we're gearing up slowly but surely for a very exciting season. Yeah, if that yields trophies, we'll have to wait and see. But the squad's starting to look like it could be raining a bit of chaos, which is always fun.
I was thinking about it again as well. I think, to be honest, he's the sort of point. He's got a point cool guy, but I think in general, City are just more. I think they'll go for one risk, but I think centrally they want something just a bit more secure. And I think they decided out wide once again. It's a bit easier to take a risk out wide than it is through the middle. And I think Kudus would be a project in which Doku would be, but two projects. Too much, and I don't think Pep wants a project through the middle right now. I think he wants experience. I think he wants know-how, and to be fair, I would argue also League One is a higher level than Eredivisie. It's more physical. It's tough, and also he's got a freakish attribute. I would say Doku is literally statistically probably the best dribbler in Europe, which is insane to say out loud, other than maybe Pete, Neymar, or Messi, which is fair enough. But he has one attribute which is freakish. Kudus is a very good player, but I wouldn't say he has that one insane attribute in the way that Doku's coming in as a guy who's clearly going to just run past people for fun. And when you look at Man City the other day, against Newcastle, throwing a raw, angry, happy Doku at that game, and that is Dan Burns losing sleep. You know what I mean? Because it's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
So I mean that's the point there. And there was also that really throwaway comment, wasn't it, from Guardiola the other day about not throwaway actually. It was actually very considered. Comment about
the Grealish one.
Yeah, where he said, and I don't think that was a dig. I think he meant just this season. It wasn't overall, but he said he hasn't quite got the brilliance out wide yet. And I think it's really obvious that Pep wants his wingers. And we talk about Pep in terms of does he want his wingers to be defensive and keep the ball? That comment to me just sort of explained, no, that's always been a nonsense. He does want his wingers to do magical things. And he made a point of saying Grealish isn't providing brilliance out wide yet. And that, to me, he's obviously telling Grealish, keep the ball, but also dribble, beat your man, get crosses and create chances. He's not doing it. And I think Pep wants someone who knows he can do it. And I think Doku, of course, it sounds like he's a cheeky signing more than anything, but Pep still has to go, yeah, of course. And it's just a different signing. But to be honest, I can't wait for him. I think it's going to be a whole load of fun, and it could be announced in 10 minutes. Who knows, man? It could be announced anytime. It's going to happen, and we'll see. Mate. Thank you very much for joining me. It's been a good chat. Of course, I would like to say if you are enjoying this video and this kind of content, do give this video a massive like. It'd be hugely appreciated. And subscribe if you are new to the channel as well. Let me know down in the comments as well if you prefer Eberechi Eze or Matheus Nunes from Manchester City. And if not them, who would you rather see? And of course, let me know what you make of Jeremy Doku is coming in very, very soon. And check out, of course, the City Report podcast. Where can people find it, Amos?
At City Report Pod, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts from.
All the usual places. Go and give it a check. It's wonderful stuff. Guys, thank you very much for watching and listening, of course. And Amos, thank you very much for coming on, man. Guys, have a wonderful day. There'll be more videos because the world never stops at the moment. City are absolutely... It's crazy time. But that's, I think, City for the next 7-8 days now, I reckon. Anyway, have a good day in a bit. Love you all loads. Bye-bye.